It worked out great because this is what we needed for the episode. I mean, the comic really there was a lot of stuff going on here. I mean, we were dealing with uh, the like we mentioned, Ahsoka identifying who she is and making that valiant effort to escape. She's trying to be deceptive with them. We got the whole mall situation going on. We have her fighting to escape. So we needed that comic relief. And I'm glad we got it because, especially with the Toons, man, those guys, you're right. All I saw was Ben Quadraneros, a bunch of Ben Quadraneros standing there. And they, sometimes in Star Wars, have you ever noticed this? There are some species that just, no matter what, they all act the same. Apparently, the Tongs are one of those.
Yeah.
The Toons, the Tongs, they're one of those. They all act like Ben Quadraneros, that
right,
overly confident, frustrated. Then you got the other, the Gungans.
Right.
They're all a bunch of Jar Jars. It's funny.
Yeah.
It is funny, but I'm glad it was fun seeing them in there, and that of course was a nice nod to the Phantom Menace with the Tongs. But Rafa's plan, man, it was gutsy. Very Han Solo-esque, as you mentioned. I liked it.
Yeah, me too.
I liked it. So let's take a look here. Probably the biggest scene in the episode. Well, not the biggest scene, but one of the biggest scenes in the episode was the return of Darth Maul. Of course, Maul at this point, as doing the holographic projection talk with Mark Kim about the missing spice and everything, and production being down, and things just aren't going. And Maul is just pretty much playing hardball as you would expect Maul to do, right?
Oh yeah.
And of course, I love this because this links into right in Solo, because he's talking about Crimson Dawn and being the head of Crimson Dawn, and you don't want to cross Crimson Dawn. It was a great nod to Solo, which was a fabulous movie.
Oh yeah.
But again, helps set up for that final arc. How did you feel when Maul first popped up on the scene, David?
Well, I was like you, buddy. I was not expecting to see him in this any of these 4 episodes, but like you, I was thankful to see him, and it does bridge it over to this last arc. As you've been describing this scene and how it is a direct connection to Solo when he mentioned Crimson Dawn, I'm just listening to the voice, and I love Sam Witwer's work. Hearing his voice again as Maul, I think back to the movie Solo, and I think most of the people listening to our podcast would know that Sam Witwer did do the voice in the movie. It's Ray Park playing Maul, but that's Sam Witwer. So again, you've got that continuity, the exact same voice from Maul. And so I loved seeing it. I loved hearing Sam Witwer's voice. And of course, it's got me even, more excited for this last arc.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. It is for me, seeing Maul pop up, like I said in my opening statement, I wasn't expecting it, but it was, it was great because it reminded me of that closing scene of Solo when Kira's having that conversation with him, and he's got that same holographic evilness about him. He's got the cloak over his head, and you know who it is by, of course, the voice. And of course, it's Sam Witwer, of course, who voiced him throughout the Clone Wars and throughout Rebels and even in Solo. So we have that consistency there. It is, it was chilling. Even though he wasn't, threatening, and he was threatening the Pikes, but he's not, I don't know, he's being straightforward and he's being Maul. I mean, he's manipulating the Pikes the way he manipulated Ezra in Rebels, I would say, and it was so much fun to see that. Even if it's just a 30-second scene, maybe 4 or 5 lines at the most, but it was so much fun to see. I enjoyed it so much, and it's just, to me, it was a scene that literally hyped me up for what's to come next.
Oh gosh. Yeah, well, we're ready to go, man. Like I said, it's Tuesday night. I'm ready for Friday.
Oh, absolutely, I am too. It's going to be exciting. It is, starting in that final arc. Before we get into that, though, this episode all wraps up back on Coruscant after the escape and the teardown of the Pikes system there. They end up, Rafa and Trace and Ahsoka end up back on Coruscant in their hangar, and they are safe and sound and good to go, per se. They make their escape, they get home, and of course, this is when they're talking about what comes next. And all of a sudden, from behind them, you hear "making new friends, I see." And of course, turns around, and there is Bo-Katan. And of course, Ahsoka remembers Bo-Katan, of course, from her experiences earlier in the series. Immediately tells Trace and Rafa to get behind her, and she immediately assumes this combative stance. And I like how Bo-Katan proceeded from there. She didn't do what you would expect from Mandalorian. She didn't go immediately into a fight stance and start fighting her. She was there for a reason. She was there for a purpose. She basically removed her helmet and said, "Good, you remember me. Death Watch is dead. It's no more. I need your help. We have a common enemy." And then presents her the image of Maul. So, and of course, she's like, we need to go. I can brief you on the way, but we need to go. So Ahsoka decides to go with her, but she has her hesitations. And what was interesting about it, she was like, "I'm not sure I like where this path will lead." And Trace is like, "Back with the Jedi." And she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, you'll do what's right. You always do." And so she ups and leaves with Bo-Katan. How did you feel, David, about that closing scene? Because it was really, I mean, no doubt about it, this closing scene was designed to build into the Siege of Mandalore arc we're getting. How did you feel about that closing scene and how it was done?
Just awestruck. I kind of, like I was mentioning to you beforehand, the shot of that Mandalorian gauntlet taking off and going out from level 1313 all the way up, and it's going to go out obviously back to Mandalore. I just awestruck. What an ending. And of course, I loved the conversation prior to that too, even before Bo-Katan shows up. So just a jam-packed episode that ends on in a perfect transition to where we've been wanting to go, all of us Star Wars fans, for so many years, since I guess really it'd be probably 2012 when they ended up canceling it and came back with season 6 in 2014, and now we've been waiting roughly 6 years since those episodes. So this has been a long wait. So and the other thing I would say is this: I really love the character of Bo-Katan. Mm-hmm. I really do. From when we first saw her here in the Clone Wars to, I remember sitting there again with you and Jason and Gary. We're there at Star Wars Celebration in 2017. And we get to see, Bo-Katan and those Mandalorians in that season premiere, right? Of what? I guess season 4 of of Rebels. So I love seeing her there, getting to see that episode with you and our guys. My son and daughter were there too. That was a very early morning for us to get into that panel on that Saturday morning. You and I got there at 4 a.m, and
Yep.
but we got in, and we did just fine. So I love the character and all the iterations of her, and I cheer for her.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I mean, she's, what I've never hit the fact. One of my favorite characters is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I really loved his storyline when it came to Satine, and of course, Bo is Satine's sister.
Yeah.
So she's got there's that connection there to Obi-Wan, which I can't wait to see how this plays out in this next arc, because after Satine was killed by Maul, it was Bo who helped Obi-Wan escape. And so this is, to me, this is going to be interesting. And you're right. Um, there's so much going on in these last 5 minutes of the episode that it's crazy how much they packed into it. And the conversation between Ahsoka and the Martez sisters before they even showed up, before the Mandalorians even showed up, when they're talking about her being a Jedi and everything. I mean, that was the perfect closure, because Rafa's like, "So what are you gonna do? Arrest me?" He says, "For the spice thing, that's what you Jedi do, right?" And Ahsoka's like, "I'm not a Jedi. I told you that." Like, why? And they couldn't understand why anybody would walk away from the Jedi and that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
But they understand.
Yeah.
They come through their prejudice of the Jedi and everything, and they actually become friends. And they're like, we wouldn't be here without you because of what you did. Jedi and I like how Trace put it. She goes, "Jedi or not, we consider you a friend." And I love that, because I mean, you saw a change in character and opinion from both Trace and Rafa, and even Ahsoka, because once Bo gives her the ultimatum, you got 5 minutes to decide whether you want to come help me with Maul or not. When Ahsoka's conflicted about how the path will bring her back to the Jedi, Rafa looks at her and she's like, "Go. This is what you need to do." She was actually encouraging her. I loved it. It's like she was like, "This is what you're meant to do," and she saw Ahsoka's path going forward, and just helped Ahsoka see it as well. And I love that. Absolutely love that.
Well said. Well said.
All right. So, of course, that pretty much closes out our discussion of Together Again. Final thoughts, David. What are your final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I really see the need for these episodes. Admittedly, I was struggling with these episodes after watching the first two. I don't, shy away from that at all. I was just like, oh goodness. But I wrote down to myself, I should have known better, right? And Filoni, I trust. Over the years, a lot of non-Star Wars fans have questioned, why we watch cartoons. I've heard that from people, or if I tell them about the podcasts that I've done with you and so on and so forth. And I tell them there's so much more than just cartoons. And, you and I spent 2 years talking about the very deep issues presented by Star Wars Resistance. Now, on the surface, that was billed as a cartoon for 5 to 12-year-olds, particularly with Kaz's physical humor and so on and so forth. Well, you and I hit the deep issues in that because they were there. 5 to 12-year-olds didn't see them, but us adults did. Well, here in the Clone Wars, there's not only action and adventure here in this series, but the coverage of the deepest issues we face as humans.